How dare you, Obieze? How dare you reject me? If I wouldn't have you, no one would. The kingdom of Udala had once been a land sung about in distant villages, where golden harvests filled the barns and laughter floated through the air like sweet palm wine aroma. But now, beneath that beauty, fear walked with silent footsteps. At the heart of that fear was Prince Obieze, the heir who was once Udala's pride and future. Children who once chased butterflies in the palace courtyard now avoided the gates entirely, whispering stories of the mad prince who prowled the corridors at night. Once, Obieze had been a symbol of hope, brave, wise, and beloved by the people. His smile alone could brighten a gloomy day, but that was before the curse. Now, he wandered the palace like a restless spirit torn between worlds. Servants often found him muttering strange words that sounded like broken pieces of forgotten magic. Sometimes, he laughed loudly in an empty hall. Other times, he screamed as though invisible hands tormented him. And when anyone dared approach, he transformed into a storm, wide, unpredictable, and dangerous. His once charming eyes, the same eyes that had won the admiration of maidens across Udala, now burned with a frightening glow. Some said it was madness, others said it was a curse eating away at his soul. Whatever it was, it left even the bravest palace guards trembling when they heard his footsteps echoing at night. Behind closed doors, the king and the queen lived in agony. The queen spent her nights kneeling before the gods, her tear-soaked wrappers clinging to her trembling frame. The king, once a mighty ruler, had grown thin with worry. He would stand by his son's door listening to Obieze's anguished cries, helpless to save the child he had once carried on his shoulders during festivals. Their grief was a heavy, unspoken cloud over the palace, and yet they hid it from the people. For a ruler must not show weakness. The whispers of Udala pointed fingers at just one person, Mbeke, the rejected witch who once desired the prince beyond reasons. When Obieze refused her advances, she vowed that if she could not have him, no woman ever would. And under the ominous glow of the blood moon, she spoke a curse that twisted his mind and chained his spirits in a world between sanity and madness. Priests came, Dibias came, herbalists came. Some claimed they would heal him, but all left the palace with fear in their eyes and defeat heavy on their tongues. None had the power to unbind what Mbeke had woven. Festivals lost their music, markets lost their colors. Udala held its breath, waiting, hoping, and despairing. Yet, while darkness tightened its grip on the kingdom, fate quietly stirred in an unexpected corner. In a small compound far from the palace walls lived Kamsi, a maiden with a heart as steady as the morning sun. Unknown to her, destiny had begun to tread her name into the future of Udala, a future where she would stand before the cursed prince, not as prey, not as victim, but as the one destined to break the chain that had bound him. Kamsi was not the type of girl people forgot easily. In Udala, her name carried weight, not because of beauty or wealth, but because of her spirit. She walked with a confidence that made even elders pause. Her steps steady like someone who knew exactly who she was. Life had tested her early. Losing her parents before she could even say mama had carved strength into her bones. Her grandmother, Mama Uzo, often told her, a heart that survives pain becomes a weapon the world cannot break. And truly, Kamsi carried that weapon proudly. She was the girl who spoke boldly when others swallowed their words, the one who confronted bullies in the marketplace, who defeated strangers as if they were her own blood, who could find hope even in the middle of a storm. People often whispered that she had Anya Odemma, eyes that could see goodness where others only saw dogs and trouble. She found it admirable, others found it dangerous, but no one doubted that Kamsi was different. Her days were simple: fetching water, helping Mama Uzo with herbs, laughing with friends under the big tree. She dreamed of a peaceful life, maybe a small farm, perhaps a husband who wasn't afraid of her stubborn tongue. But fate, however, had a different script for her, one she never rehearsed for. Then came one morning. The royal messengers arrived in the village square. The earth itself seemed to shift. Drums boomed in the distance as horses thundered into the village square. Mothers pulled their children close. Men straightened their wrappers. Everyone knew the palace never sent messengers without reason, and their visit was really good news. The villagers gathered, hearts pounding, as the messengers announced that the prince's condition had worsened. The diviner had cast their cowries, and the ancestors demanded a maiden, one favored by destiny, to be taken to the palace. No one understood what it meant. A healer, a sacrifice, a bride for a madman. Fear filled the crowd. When the diviner dropped the cowries, the shells danced on the earth and spelled the name Kamsi. A hush fell over the crowd so thick it felt like smoke. People stared at her as if lightning had struck at her feet. Some gasped and made the sign to ward off evil. Others shook their heads, murmuring that Kamsi's strong spirit was the one thing fierce enough to stand before the cursed prince. A few, particularly those who envied her confidence, whispered that perhaps she had offended a spirit somewhere. Mama Uzo's eyes filled with fear, but she squeezed Kamsi's hand with trembling strength. "My child," she whispered, "this thing had called your name. You cannot run from it." Fear coiled itself around Kamsi's stomach. Her palms grew cold, her throat tightened, and for a brief moment, she wished she could disappear into the crowd. The thought of being taken to the palace, of being confronted with the madness of Prince Obieze, made her heart pound like talking drums. But then she lifted her chin, slowly, steady. Her voice was buried above a whisper, yet it spread across the square. "I will go." Gasps rose again. Some saw bravery, others saw foolishness. But in Kamsi's eyes burned a determination that even fear could not dim. Running had never been part of her nature, no. If destiny had chosen her, she would meet it head on, even if it led her into the jaws of a curse. But little did she know her name had just been woven into the palace's darkest secrets. The moment Kamsi stepped into the sprawling palace, her breath caught in her throat. Everything felt too large, too silent, too watchful. The marble floor gleamed like still water, and the towering pillars cast long shadows that seemed to whisper secrets of their own. But it was the eyes, those countless eyes, that peered her the most. Palace women paused mid-step. Servants pretended to sweep while stealing glances. Guards stiffened as though she carried bad luck in her steps. Some stared with pity, their expressions soft and mournful. Others looked relieved, grateful that at last someone else has been chosen. A few watched with hidden satisfaction, eager to see how long the bold village girl would last in the lion's den. But Kamsi kept her gaze forward, though her pulse hammered violently against her ribs. She could feel the whispers brushing her skin like cold fingers. The new bride, another one? She won't last a week. Look at her, too young, too alive, shame on her. When the queen approached, her presence filled the hall with a mist of regal grace and unspeakable sorrow. Queen Nnenna embraced Kamsi's hands, her eyes shimmering with emotions too heavy for words. Hope, guilt, fear, and something like desperation. "My child," the queen murmured, voice trembling. "Forgive us for what we are asking of you. If there were another way, we would never bring you here." Kamsi bowed deeply, her knees nearly touching the polished floor. "I will do my best, Your Majesty." But even as she spoke, her hands shook beneath her wrapper. The palace corridors darkened as they led her towards the prince's chamber. Each step echoed like a warning drum. The guards exchanged tense glances. One whispered a prayer, another silently touched the amulet hidden beneath his armor. Then, the heavy door cracked open. Prince Obieze stood in the center of the room, wide, furious, and tremblingly lost. His hair hung in tangled locks, his once royal robe none torn and stained. His chest heaved as if every breath fought against invisible chains. His eyes, those once gentle eyes, burned with a madness that made the room itself seem to shrink. The moment he noticed them, he erupted. A stool flew across the room with the force of a hurricane. Servants screamed and ducked for cover. Obieze roared words that did not belong to this world. Harsh, ancient syllables that cloud to the air like angry spirits. He tore his robe, beat his fist against the walls, and hurled curses that made even the guards tremble. "Hold him," someone shouted. The guards rushed forward, struggling to restrain the prince as he thrashed like a man possessed. He lunged, teeth bared, fury shaking through every muscle. It took 5 strong men to pin him down. Sweat dripped from their brows as if they were wrestling a beast rather than a human. Everyone expected Kamsi to collapse in terror. Everyone expected her to scream or run. Everyone expected her courage to shatter like clay. But she didn't move. She just stood there and watched him. Really watched him. Even through the chaos, even through his violent rage, she saw something the others didn't. Behind the madness in his eyes, beyond the shrieking spirit that controlled his tongue, she caught a flicker, small, desperate and trapped. A silent cry for help. A soul imprisoned behind walls built by curse. Her fear softened, replaced by something she couldn't explain. Compassion, curiosity, destiny. She didn't know, but she felt it deeply and powerfully. When Obieze's eyes met hers for a split second, something inside her shifted. The world went still, as though the gods held their breaths. And in that moment, Kamsi understood one thing with absolute certainty. This was not a monster. This was a man suffering. A prince drowning beneath a cause he did not deserve. And without knowing why, without knowing how, she whispered to herself, "I will not abandon him." The palace expected fear, but fate had placed courage in its place. And the story of Udala's most unlikely bride had only just begun. The days that followed were a strange mixture of dread and discovery. Kamsi found herself walking the palace halls like someone trapped between two worlds. The world she came from and the dark mystery she had stepped into. Every morning, she was escorted to Prince Obieze's chamber. Every night, she returned to her room with new questions, swelling like restless spirits in her mind. The palace chief priest, Dibia Okika, was the first to break the silence surrounding the cause. One evening, he summoned her to the sacred archive, a room filled with ancient scrolls, harps tied in bundles, and clay pots that hummed with spiritual energy. The air smelled of dust, incense, and secrets. "You must understand what you have walked into," Okika warned, his voice low, his eyes shadowed with worry. Mbeke was not an ordinary witch. She was once the kingdom's greatest seer, before betrayal darkened her heart. He placed before her a scroll wrapped in red cloth. "Read," he urged. Kamsi unrolled the parchment, her fingers trembling. The symbols were old, carved in ink that seemed too alive for something centuries. They told a chilling story, one of heartbreak, vengeance, and a curse crafted with forbidden power. Mbweke had not simply cursed the prince out of jealousy. She had bound his spirit to a realm where nightmares had teeth. The scroll spoke of a chosen woman, someone whose courage could withstand the prince's darkest demons. Someone whose purity of heart could call back the fragments of Obieze's soul scattered across the spiritual world. Kamsi's chest tightened as she whispered the words aloud. A woman, strong enough to stay. Obika's eyes met hers with quiet intensity. This burden was never meant for a weak heart. That is why the cowries called your name. Kamsi swallowed hard. She didn't feel chosen. She felt overwhelmed, like a girl standing in the middle of a storm, far bigger than herself. But destiny rarely asked for readiness. As she spent more time with Obieze, strange things began to happen. Things she couldn't explain to anyone. She noticed faint glowing symbols on his skins. Ancient markings that flickered like dying flames and vanished before she could blink. The palace healers claimed not to see them, but she did, every time. Some nights, a chilling wind swept through his chamber even when the heat outside suffocated the land. The curtains fluttered without cause. Candles extinguished themselves. The shadows around Obieze stretched too far, lingered too long, and sometimes moved. Once, as the prince slept fitfully, Kamsi saw a dark outline hovering behind him, like a second body chained to his own. When she blinked, it was gone, but the cold remained. And then there were the whispers. At first, she thought she imagined it, the soft calling of her name, floating in silence of midnight. Kamsi. Barely audible, barely human. She pressed her ear to Obieze's door and froze. The voice came again. Kamsi. Again and again, but this time filled with pain, yearning and fear. Yet, whenever morning came, Obieze looked at her with no recognition. His eyes were clouded with madness or exhaustion. He either ignored her presence or recoiled from it. He didn't know he had whispered her name. In fact, he didn't know he spoke at all during the night. It was as if the same part of him, the part untouched by the curse, reached for her only when the sun disappeared. Every new discovery deepened her fear. But oddly, it deepened something else too. Her connection to him. She couldn't explain it, but she felt drawn to the broken prince, as though fate had tied an invisible rope between their souls. Many would have run, many had before her, but Kamsi was not like them. She clenched her fists, lifted her chin and whispered to herself every night, "If he is fighting for his soul, then I will fight with him." The curse had begun to reveal its shadows, but Kamsi was ready to walk into the darkness, even if it swallowed her whole. The night it happened was unlike any other. The palace had grown used to Obieze's violent episodes. Doors shaking under the force of his screams, guards struggling to restrain him, spiritual symbols glowing faintly on the walls. But tonight, the air itself felt wrong. thick and heavy, charged with unseen presence. Even the moon seemed to hide behind the clouds, refusing to witness what was unfolding. Obieze thrashed wildly on the floor, his voice echoing in a language no living tongue could explain. The guards fought to hold him down, sweat soaking through their armor. His power was unnatural, like someone wrestling with a demon possessing the strength of 10 men. Kamsi stand back. One of the guards shouted as Obieze broke free, lunging forward with terrifying force. But something inside Kamsi's spirit told her not to move. Her heart hammered against her ribcage, but her feet stayed rooted. She watched Obieze, not the madness, but the desperation buried beneath it. His eyes held a pain she had only seen in her darkest dream. Then, without thinking, without planning, without fear guiding her steps, she reached out. "Stop," she whispered. Her fingertips brushed his cheek. A heartbeat, a pause, a silence so deep it swallowed the screams. And then the world changed. The air shifted, humid with ancient energy. The wind that had been whooping through the room stilled instantly, like a supernatural hand had pressed it down. A strange warmth flowed from her palm into the prince's skin, pulsing like the beats of a drum. Obieze froze. The white fire in his eyes flickered, softened, then dimmed. His muscles relaxed as if some invisible chain had snapped. Then his knees buckled, and he fell straight into her arms. He trembled like a frightened child, his breath shallow, his body shaking uncontrollably. For the first time since she had arrived, Kamsi saw him not as a mad prince, but as a broken soul begging for peace. All around them, attendants stared wide-eyed. A guard dropped his spear. A maiden covered her mouth in disbelief. And by the doorway, Queen Nnenna pressed a trembling hand to her lips as silent tears streamed down her cheeks. "The ancestors," the queen whispered. "They have touched her." Because no one, no healer, no priest, no diviner had ever been able to calm Obieze. But Kamsi, a village girl with no royal blood, had done it with a single touch. And from that night onward, everything changed. Obieze no longer lashed out at her. Even in his unstable moments, he would pause when she entered the room. His gaze followed her like a lost child, clinging to the only light in a dark world. He listened when she spoke, even if he could not fully understand her words. And when his mind wandered into shadows, her voice pulled him back, slowly, painfully but surely. Kamsi began feeling something too, a warmth in her chest, a presence in her dreams, whispers that felt older than time itself. The ancestors had begun to guide her. In visions, they showed her a sacred path leading to Udala's ancient forest, the very forest the villagers feared to enter. They revealed fragments of a forgotten ritual, one capable of breaking Mbeke's curse completely. Symbols carved into trees, a river that shimmered like liquid moonlight, and a shrine buried beneath roots older than the kingdom itself. But the visions also showed shadows, dark forms lurking in the forest, eyes watching from the undergrowth, spirits stirred by the curse, hungry for blood, determined to stop anyone who tries to undo it. Kamsi woke from each dreams breathless, sweat-soaked and shaking. She knew what the ancestors wanted. She knew what she had to do. But one truth echoed in her heart. This journey would demand everything. Her courage, her spirit, perhaps even her life. And still, she was more determined than ever. Because for the first time, she had seen the real Obieze, the fragile prince hidden beneath layers of torment. And she refused to let him drown alone. Then, the next day, the journey began. The path to Iowa, the sacred river of forgotten covenants, grew darker with every step. Trees leaned inward like ancient watchers, their twisted branches whispering warnings only spirits could understand. A cold breeze swept through the forest, raising goosebumps on Kamsi's arms. Even though the night was warm, Obieze clung to her side, breathing heavily, his corpse glowing heavier the closer they came to the river. Just as they entered the clearing, the ground trembled, the air split open, and in a violent swirl of black smoke and crimson sparks, Mbeke appeared. Her beauty was uncertain, too sharp, too perfect, as though carved by forbidden magic. Her eyes glowed like burning embers. Her long braids slittered behind her like living shadows. When she laughed, the sun sliced through the forest, cold enough to freeze running water. So she paused, circling them slowly. This is the brave little girl the ancestors chose. Her gaze flickered over Kamsi with poisonous amusement. You dare carry her heart strong enough to challenge me? Obieze let out a tortured howl and collapsed to his knees, clutching his head. The witch tightened her invisible chains around his spirit, pulling at him like a puppet. His body jagged, his eyes rolled back as if trapped between words. Stop, Kamsi cried, rushing forward. Let him go. Mbeke smirked. You command me? She leaned close, her voice dropping into a whisper sharpened by jealousy. He was supposed to be mine. His heart, his throne, his future, all of it. And now, you, a nobody, village girl, think you can take what I have claimed? Kamsi's fear rose like a tide, but she planted her feet firmly on the ground. She stepped in front of Obieze, shielding him with her own body. Her voice trembled, but her eyes blazed with conviction. No woman owns another human being, she declared. Not through love, not through obsession, and certainly not through dark magic. Her words cracked through the clearing like lightning. Mbeke's expression twisted with rage. You insolent child, she roared. She raised her hands, and the forest exploded with shadows, black, writhing spirits, thin as smoke yet sharp as blade, swarmed towards Kamsi with hungry shrieks. Their mouths gaped open, ready to tear her apart. Kamsi gasped and braced herself, but she did not move away from Obieze. She would face death before letting the witch take him. Just as the spirits reached her, a biting light erupted beneath her feet. The ancestors rose. Figures made of pure light and ancient power surrounded her, forming a glowing barrier that shimmered like a shield forged from the sun and moon. The spirits collided with the barrier and were instantly repaired. Their screams echoing through the forest as they disintegrated into dusk. Kamsi stood tall inside the circle of light, her hair lifting as if touched by a supernatural breeze. Her eyes glowed faintly, golden, ancestral. Mbeke staggered back, her breath catching in her throat. No, she shrieked. This cannot be you. You are the chosen one. Kamsi felt the energy of her ancestors flowing through her, steadying her hands, strengthening her voice. Yes, she said calmly, powerfully. And your reign of darkness ends tonight. The witch scream shook the forest, but it was too late. For the first time, she knew fear. For the first time, she realized she was no longer fighting a mere mortal girl, but a vessel chosen by the gods themselves. And the battle for Obieze's soul had begun to end slowly. The moment Kamsi stepped onto the riverbank, the air thickened like a living thing. The river of the ancestral echoes, usually calm and shimmering, churned with violent currents, reacting to the clash of ancient powers. The spirit had shown her every step of the ritual in her dreams, but performing it in the waking world left her hands trembling. She gathered the sacred herbs, oja leaves, blue hibiscus petals, and powdered moonstone, and crushed them into a glowing paste. As she traced the symbols of the ancestors on Obieze's chest, the cursed prince screamed and twisted, his body fighting the light, trying to enter him. Kamsi lifted her hands to the sky and chanted the incantations, each word older than Udala itself. The ground shook, thunder cracked open the heavens, the river turned pitch black as if swallowing all the stars. Then, Obieze's chest lifted. Kamsi froze, afraid to even blink. Slowly, his eyes lid fluttered open. Gone were the wide haunted shadows that once consumed his gaze. In their place came clarity, warm, deep and painfully human. He looked at her as though seeing her for the very first time. Truly seeing her. Confusion passed across his features, then recognition. Then gratitude so profound it stole her breath away. Kamsi, he whispered, her name falling from his lips like a prayer rediscovered. When he finally touched her cheek, gentle, almost disbelieving, her knees nearly buckled. The curse had been broken, the prince had returned. Their journey back to Udala transformed into a celebration before they even reached the gates. Birds soared above them in circles as if delivering the news. Villagers abandoned their chores, running out with tears, laughter and praise. Drummers appeared on both sides of the path, beating rhythms so powerful the ground itself seemed to dance. Word spread like wildfire. The prince is back, the curse is gone, the ancestors has listened. By the time they approached the palace courtyard, Udala had gathered in full. The king and the queen ran towards their son. No guards, no protocol, just raw, trembling parents who had prayed for a miracle. They collapsed around him, weeping uncontrollably, touching his face, his hands, his hair, as if afraid he might vanish again. Then they turned to Kamsi. The queen lifted her hand with reverence, as though touching something sacred. The king raised Kamsi's arms before the crowd. Behold, he declared with a breaking voice, the girl who brought our son home. Cheers erupted like thunder. Praise songs soared. Early women shouted so loudly palace birds scattered into the sky. Yet, in the midst of all the noise, Kamsi's heart held a quieter joy, a soft glowing warmth meant for her alone. It wasn't the applause, the titles, or the gifts pouring at her feet that moved her. It was the way Obieze looked at her, with a smile full of freedom, full of peace, full of a future he had almost lost. And in that smile, Kamsi knew everything she had endured was worth it. Udala had not known such joy in years. The days following Obieze's restoration felt like a festival of light. Every heart glowed brighter, every drumbeat echoed with renewed purpose. The royal halls bustled as elders, chiefs, and titled men and women gathered to discuss the kingdom's future. They spoke with conviction. The girl who saved the prince must become his bride. It was tradition, it was destiny, and it was the only fitting end to a miracle. But when Obieze stood, the room felt silent. No longer the broken man haunted by shadow. He now carried himself with calm authority, the strength of a king reborn. His voice rang through the council chambers, steady, clear and respectful. Kamsi is not a debt to be paid, he said. She is not a trophy for my suffering. Her heart is hers alone, and if she ever chooses me, it must be by her own will, not the kingdoms. His words turned the room into thoughtful silence. The elders exchanged glances. Some nodded, others wiped their eyes. For the first time, they saw not just a prince, but a man shaped by pain, restored by love, and humbled by the woman who stood by him. That evening, beneath the soft glow of lanterns, Obieze found Kamsi in the palace gardens. The moon washed her face in silver, and for a moment, he simply watched her. This girl who had walked through the jaws of danger to pull him back into the world. "Kamsi," he said gently. She turned, her heart thudding at the tenderness in his tone. "I am not asking out of duty or pressure or tradition." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I ask because since I opened my eyes again, my spirit refuses to rest unless you are near. Will you walk beside me? Not as a savior, not as an obligation, but as a partner chosen by your heart." Kamsi felt her breath catch. Heat blossomed across her cheeks, while her chest fluttered with emotions she could no longer deny. She had fought for him, cried for him, risked everything for him, and somewhere between fear and destiny, her heart had grown entangled with his. Her shy smile was soft, but her voice was steady. "Yes, Obieze, I will." Their wedding became a celebration the villagers would recount for generations. From the first light of dawn, the drums boomed with joy, shaking the earth with their rhythms. Women in bright wrappers spun through the streets like weaving rainbows. Masked dancers dramatized the fall of Mbeke, leaping and spinning with a floor that made children gasp and elders clap in approval. The entire kingdom became a sea of color, laughter and praise. Kamsi and Obieze exchanged their vows beneath the sacred Iroko tree, the same tree where generations of rulers had prayed for strength. A warm breeze swept over the gathering, stirring wrappers and lifting spirits. The palace priest raised his staff. "The wind carries the ancestors' blessing," he declared. "Udala's future is secure." Tears streamed in the queen's eyes. The king placed his hands over his heart. Villagers shouted with joy, and Obieze took Kamsi's hand, the gratitude in his eyes speaking louder than any vow. As seasons passed, their region blossomed into a golden era. Obieze ruled with humility shaped by his suffering, and Kamsi guided the kingdom with courage shaped by her journey. Together, they restored unity, fairness, and hope. Udala flourished again, and so their story lived on, passed from mothers to children, sung by storytellers under moonlight, as the tale of the girl who defied darkness and the prince whose heart she freed. A legend providing that courage can reshape destiny and love can break even the darkest cause. Hi besties, thank you for watching today's tale. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. Right now, I'll have to go and see you in our next story. Bye!